At the last governing board meeting, it was asked a little bit, or since then, I've been asked about the process of the portrait of a graduate. So I wanted to provide you with some additional information. On this slide here, I have posted the purpose, which we identified with our stakeholder groups, which was essentially to identify the skills and attitudes our students would possess in order to be ready for their future, whether it's with college, careers, or within their communities. And so these were always the last two questions that we asked in our focus groups. Um, we did it a couple of different ways with our parents and our students. We provided them with paper and gave them time to talk and collaborate with one another and come up with suggestions. We asked them what are the skills and characteristics a DVUSD graduate should possess, and then in what ways do they believe that a DVUSD graduate should contribute to society. And here are just some examples that came from our students and our parents. Here are some more examples. This seemed to be everybody's favorite question. Lots of talk on this topic. And then after we put together, we went through, as I told you, and analyzed the words that we collected from our almost 300 stakeholders. We went together and analyzed them to see which words popped up the most. And from there, we categorized them into categories and then sent them out again to our stakeholders, specifically to our parents and our student group for round 1, and then to everybody for round 2. So here's some feedback that we got from one of our parents. For our kids, we took the first draft back to them in person and asked them to just give us a score. Out of 10, what score do you think it is? And then give us some written feedback. So we spent about 20 minutes with them during the Superintendent Advisory Council, and they had great, very specific feedback. They hated the pencil, but beyond, once we got past the fact that they hated the pencil, they gave us some really nice feedback on the words. They all found the errors that were there, and then we went back and revised the process again. Here's some of our kids that were working on this feedback. Of course, we took these two questions, all of our focus groups. In total, we had 20 focus groups, which consisted of all of our stakeholders. Here's a summary again of the different groups that we spoke with. Here are the statistics on the number of participants from our focus groups. And then we looped out the plan as well as the portrait of a graduate. I included at the bottom the dates that I didn't have last time from the governing board update. Specifically, speaking of the fall, we've been updating the governing board since pretty much every week, it looks like, since August 5th. And then I just wanted to point out the differences between the current strategic plan and the upcoming strategic plan. From the original report, you remember that we did an initial survey, and the majority of people and our committee agreed that they wanted to keep the vision, the mission, the core values, the first key strategic priority areas 1, 2, and 3. We did change number 4 to just be excellence and organizational improvement, because the majority of people wanted to embed accountability into each of the 4 areas, which we did. And then for the priority objectives, you can see that we altered them to really match the new language, or the language that we use currently that aligns to best practices. But if you look at it, you see that it's really not that entirely different. For example, excellence in workforce performance. Instead of healthy district culture, we have supportive, purposeful workplace culture. Instead of employee sourcing and recruitment, it's employee recruitment and retention. Just a little bit more meaningful to the phrases that we use in our professional development and with the resources that we study. So here's the differences here. We did take away student enrollment as a priority objective, and it became a lag measure instead, because we felt like that was more the effect of the work that we were doing, and we heard pretty loud and clear that there was a need to build and support more business and community partnerships. So that did take the place of that one. And then in number 4, instead of plan, secure, and allocate district resources, we did change that to optimize resources. it's still essentially the same work. For the portrait of a graduate, I pulled up the 2015-16 version and kind of did a little crosswalk so you can see the similarities and the differences between the old version and the proposed version. So for you'll see a lot of the same words, just in different places. Think critically, for example, you find in problem solver, employ, skills of self-management and leadership. You find in sense of self and others, communicate effectively. There's still an entire category on effective communicator. The next one, demonstrate technical knowledge and skills. That came up quite a bit. So you find that in 3 different areas now. Work collaboratively. You see that in problem solver, and practice good citizenship. You see that under community contributor. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Tunis. Mrs. Fisher?
I wanted to make sure I was not unfair in how I read it. So I posted it. I have both sides of the aisle that follow me. I got 2 responses from the opposite side of the aisle than myself. And those were, of course, kids need these soft skills. That was one in support of. The other one was, of course, EQ is important, do better. When I go to the other side, and I'm not going to read all of the comments because some of them aren't kind, but one that really hit kind of my point, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with the whole thing, but it said, well, it certainly doesn't sound like what they're actually doing. They make flashy graphics all day long, say they want students to be open to multiple perspectives, but in reality, if a student expresses conservative viewpoints, they are shamed, censored, bullied by teachers, and shut down. So maybe they think that sounds good, but it just isn't the normal status quo. And the other, I'm going to bypass some of those comments. The other comments that I thought were also very meaningful was it's all EQ. What about IQ? That's why they become sensitive snowflakes and couldn't take the academic challenges. Academic achievements and practical job skills, question mark. Don't schools do that anymore? And that's why I brought that forward, we add certain words to what I thought was a very neutral portrait of a graduate. It hit all kids. It hit the conservative kids, the not conservative, the religious, the LGBT. It encompassed all kids. It didn't have any of those what are trigger words in today's society. And now that those are in here, it's a viewpoint of a lot of individuals. And I believe that taking that direction will encourage parents to take their students to a school that's more in line with them. And so that is my disappointment. That's why I brought that forward. I'm not the only one reading it the way I did. I understand all the work that you put into it, and I really do appreciate it. Strategic planning is very difficult. I do see where you stayed close to a lot of the traditional, academics and also bringing the kids forward. I just wish it didn't have those things that are in society trigger words. The last comment that I received, I didn't receive publicly, I received privately, and it was a student. And the student said, we aren't allowed, if we don't support modern society, we aren't allowed to speak up. And that wasn't the first comment time I'd heard that comment. I heard it way back in, I want to say like 2017. And so I would hope that we would have a strategic plan that encompasses all of our children, not just some of our children. That's just my comment.
Mrs. Ordway.
Oh, yeah. I was going to save part of this for my board report, but it's that time of year when you start to see students that are alumni, and they sit and they chat, and they talk about where they are, what they're doing, and how they got there. So many of the things they'll tell me is, I'm doing great. I learned this at whichever the high school is, and since Deer Valley and O'Connor, and all of you guys are here except for Anita. Anyway, they'll just talk about what they learned at those schools, and sometimes they go back to the elementary schools. What they are wishing they learned and was maybe specified as a skill are the soft skills. How to be tolerant of many different people, whether they're tall or short, they don't have the same opinions, but to keep an open mind, because sometimes people that have opposite opinions of you end up filling some voids on both sides. And those are from students. Those are from students that have graduated and are either at university, some of them work, I'm trying to see who I have here. Some of them are working in retail, and some of them are doing their own thing. But when I have seen them, which is interesting because we just improved our continuous improving of our strategic plan, it seems to me from the 50 or 60 kids that I've seen so far, and I can send you their phone numbers if you'd like to have some people to talk to, Dr. Tunis, but it seems that the portrait of a graduate seems to be right on target. And I would ask Mrs. Fisher which word or words she thinks are igniting people or shocking them. Because I see the word tolerant means I can tolerate left, right, middle, top, bottom, whatever. I see the word financially literate. See on Facebook all the time, wish my kid knew how to do their taxes or balance a checking account. I see the word culturally aware, which would be culturally aware. I mean, that's got nothing that ignites you. So I'm looking at the whole thing, and I don't know which words that you're referring to that are bothering people and are going to drive them from our district.
Ms. Ordway, you already hit those words, because teaching children to be tolerant is a good thing, but it comes from their parents. And so when a student comes to our schools and they are kind to kids who do not share their religious or personal values, when they're kind to them, but they don't join in with them, they are somehow ostracized.
So,
Wait, let me
Go
finish
ahead.
my statement. We have had students who have commented that I almost have to be bisexual because if not, then I'm against LGBTQ. And and I'm not comfortable with that. I've had students who have said, if I support my heritage, then I'm a racist against other heritages because it's not allowed for my race. So while yes, I do believe that we need to teach things, what we need to teach is respect. My best friend, and everybody laughs, is a liberal Democrat. I'm a very conservative Republican. We don't talk about the subjects that we know that are just trigger points that we just don't agree with. We know it's going to be a controversial conversation. So we just don't do that. We respect each other. And that's what our children need to learn. We should not be teaching our children to be tolerant necessarily in other words, we shouldn't teach them they have to accept what is contradictory to their family beliefs as correct. We need to teach them to be respectful that they may not agree with everyone. And those are those trigger words that I took that way, and members of the community also took it that way.
Well, I guess, Dr. Tunis, maybe if you think about adding the word respect, that would solve that problem. Thank you.
Mrs. Reed.
Thank you for asking that question because that's what a question I was ask. And I agree, the parent's role in this is highly critical. And I was speaking to a student the other evening, and the student was sharing with me their dissatisfaction of their administration and how the administration they felt like the administration had failed them at their school because there was bullying that was going on that was not handled swiftly in the student's opinion. And so in talking and asking further questions, what it really came down to was the student wasn't upset with administration. The student was upset with those other students' parents because the parents weren't disciplining their kid. Their parents weren't the ones that were telling them, you know what, when you see somebody, you probably shouldn't say that. You know, it would be great if parents at some schools, you know, my daughter was called a chink almost every single day. And their eyes hurt. They would pull their eyes slanted at her and tell her that she should go back to China, where she's a quarter Japanese. She's a fifth generation Japanese American. Those are the types of things, being tolerant of people's cultures and differences. Do I want them to be fifth generation Japanese Americans? No. I just want them to be respectful of my daughter and to not call her racial slurs. I mean, I don't think that that's asking too much. And from the looks of everybody's face in the audience, I don't think that any of you are saying that that's too much. There's a difference of being tolerant of something and understanding that people have different beliefs and feelings and religions and different viewpoints and lenses all of the time. It doesn't mean that you have to believe those things, but you do need to show them respect that they can believe different things, because when it's your turn, you want that same respect shown to you. And I think that's the thing that we're forgetting. My daughter's 3/4 white. You know, we live in a different society now. We don't live in this whitewashed society. We have multiple cultures and religions and sexual identities and viewpoints, and people's political ideologies fall all through this, you know, the spectrum. That's what we saw in the election. We don't have a majority Republican or Democrat in Arizona now. Things are changing, and it doesn't mean that if I want to be respectful of somebody that's a member of the LGBTQ community, that doesn't mean that I have to be a member of the LGBTQ community. It means that I need to respect them and I need to show them the respect that I would want to be shown too, because I'm a member, because I'm straight. I don't understand. These are not trigger words, but parents have to be a part of this too. And Dr. Tunis, and I realize that you did not develop the Portrait of a Graduate back in 2015, 2016, but was that voted on by that current board when that came on?
Ms. Reed, at the bottom, it says who it was created by. I could not tell you if it was voted on or not.
But but the board knew about it, correct?
Yes.
And Mrs. Fisher, didn't you sit on the board when this was done? I really don't see much of a difference between the 2015 version and this version today. I think it's changed slightly as far as the way that it is categorized, but the world has changed quite a bit since 2015. And whether we agree with all of the changes, or we love all of the changes, or we disagree, or we want to go back to the way things were, the world's changing, and we do need respect, but respect needs to be shown on both sides. I mean, this is trigger words over what this is. And I will say that I work for, probably, if you asked anybody, my employer would probably be one of the most conservative companies in the United States of America. And I will tell you that as part of my job, I have the pleasure of teaching cultural intelligence, which is something that my company came up with and spent probably a lot of money developing. And I teach the majority of our DVUSD students who work in my company cultural intelligence. And one of the cultural intelligence pieces we talk about is how to treat members of the LGBTQ community with respect when they walk into our doors. Do they need to agree with our lifestyle or say, I want to be a part of, you know, your club? Do I want to be a part of your life? No. But they are our customers and we serve them and we love them when they're in our store. It also talks about serving the homeless with respect. It talks about treating people with disabilities with respect. These are not just we focus so much on race or sexual identity or religion, but it's a wide variety of different things that we all just need to realize how to treat each other with respect and how to get along. And I would love that that our schools do these soft skills, because talking to other business owners, especially over the last 2 years, when we're hiring 16-year-olds to come in and work, they don't have soft skills. They don't know how to look somebody in the eye and talk to them. They don't know how to go up and start conversations. Yes, these are things that that their parents should be teaching them. But these are things that we as educators in the educational community should be reinforcing. And these are also things that as community members we should be reinforcing, because you know what? They go and they interact in the community too. So I don't understand the woke part and the trigger words. I don't see any here. I think that this is beautifully done, and I am really proud of the students who stepped up and who volunteered their time to help provide feedback. And I'm thankful for all of the parents that provided feedback and the teachers and the staff, because it was open to everybody. Nobody was excluded. And so if somebody chose not to speak up, then that's their choice. It has nothing to do with this. This is the feedback that you got from the stakeholders who everybody had an opportunity to give feedback to, and it was refined multiple times. So I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tunis, for providing us some additional information. I would just like to share one conversation that I had regarding the portrait of a DVUSD graduate. And I was asked by a community member, didn't I think it was more important to measure and teach and be concerned about the academics that schools are charged with teaching, our standards? And why weren't those covered in the portrait of a DVUSD? And my explanation was that we do teach those standards. We teach the subjects required by the state of Arizona. And we grade our children, our students, in those subjects. And they get report cards. And ultimately, we teach them so that they will graduate from our high schools, ready to go out in the world. That I viewed the portrait of the graduate as the soft skills that have been mentioned several times here this evening. And I'm going to say that when I went to school, that was my parents' job. We didn't have the 6 pillars of character or many of the other programs. And not that those weren't reinforced in the school, but it certainly wasn't the first place I heard about them. Today, that doesn't happen all the time. And I'm not saying that the schools should be a substitute for parents, but I will tell you that in my role, in my elected position as Phoenix City Councilwoman, I was invited to sit down with some business owners in the city of Phoenix, and they wanted to know how they could work on standards. Actually, they said curriculum, but I told them they would have to start with standards for soft skills, because they want their schools to teach the soft skills, because when their young workers come to them out of high school or community college or college, they're not ready to work in their business. And it's very frustrating. And I'm going to tell you that the gentleman I met with, one of them, actually, I was old enough to be both of their moms, which was a little frustrating, I'm not going to lie. But it was they wanted to know about the education system. And so what I would say is that thank you for all the work you've done. Thank you for all the people who came and contributed to this. And I would encourage folks to get involved. I know that we are doing better than ever at publicly inviting folks and getting the word out. So we do grade our children, our students, on the academics, but we're also making sure that they have the opportunity to learn some other skills. We are not a replacement for parents. We are there to be a partner with the parent. And so with that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay.
I would thank the board for displaying my point to the public, and I vote nay.
I've called, thank you. Mrs. Paperman? You're voting
No, I said aye, yeah.
aye. We have 4 ayes and 1 nay. Motion passes.